Hello and welcome to a special Easter episode of Let's Develop. During the last days I had some free time, which means some more free time than usual. So I took the time to continue with JBrains' World's Best Introduction to TDD. And there in this course, I think in the beginning of the second series, he introduces the point of sale example and challenges his participants to actually implement a basic point of sale application. I'm not going to go into the details of the specification because you can look that up publicly under this URL. I'm going to put in the show notes too. Anyways, so the basic idea is that we have a point of sale system with a barcode scanner that puts the barcode into our application, and we're supposed to output the price of that very product. Yeah, and that's what I'm going to do in this episode. To get you started, I learned quite a few things from the first series of the JBrains TDD introduction, and I'm going to try to apply these things I've learned so far during this episode. So let's switch back to Eclipse and get started with setting up a project. Actually, I want to try to use only the keyboard, so Command N opens new project or new whatever wizard. Then I'm going to use actually Maven for that to manage my dependencies because I like Maven. And anyways, I think there's no easy way to do this, so I'm going to use the mouse again. Yeah, I know. Let's developer should be able to write my stuff right, and then I'm going to put this under cutter actually, because it feels like a cutter. And then we're going to name this very thing pause, because pause is short for point of sale. That's it. So finish the project create it. Very nice. I'm not going to check in right now because I want to adapt the project setup to my needs. First thing is I want to use Java 8 here, which means I'm going to configure the compiler plugin, this one here, to use Java 8. In the meantime, I installed the Java 8 support for M2E plugin so that I can actually use Java 8 with Maven projects in Eclipse, Kepler, even though there's no native support for that. Plugins, then I copied the plugin stuff. I'm going to close that one. Then we have configuration, I think. And then we have source, which I'm going to set to 1.8. And then we have target, which I'm going to set to 1.82. Then I'm going to format that, save that. Eclipse is showing us an error because we need to reload the Maven configuration. I'm going to do that. As you see, Java just switched to 1.8. And I think our project is pretty much ready to go. Next thing I have to set up is version control, which is unfortunately not directly possible from Eclipse. At least I don't know a way how to initialize Git repository in the very project folder from within Eclipse. If you know one, tell me. I'm going to do that from the console real quick. Change into my new project, say git init dot, which will create the project for me. And then in Eclipse, I have to close the project and reopen it in order for Eclipse to see that there is a repository now. Okay, so let's see. Actually, I configured the shortcut for committing too, so I can use that. I want to put the settings and project stuff on git ignore because I think that's the convention. So let's go to the navigator real quick and add this here to Can I just say to ignore, right? And the class path project files also to ignore. I think the target and also apparently the class path are on my global ignore file. Anyways, well, I wanted to use the shortcut. Now it's only the POM file going in here that's fine with me, saying setup project and commit. Next thing is that I would like to actually push, but I cannot because I have nothing remote so far. So what I'm going to do is quickly create a remote repository on GitHub. Go to my GitHub page. I'm logged in already, so create new repository, world's best introduction to TDD. Pause actually. This one's right. Description, performing, JBrains, pause exercise. And create that repository without any contents. Copying this URL should be fine, and then say team push branch. No, how do I configure remote actually? Going to do that real quick on the console. Git remote at origin, this one. And then I always forget the command, right? Git push set upstream origin master. Right, okay, now we have a project set up, our initial commit project setup complete, and we're ready to go. Okay, another thing I learned from JBrains is to create a test list, and this is actually one of the conditions you put on the project. Since I'm currently not able to record how I do a handwritten test plan or test list, I'm going to put a file into here. Let's say text, or whatever, untitled text file for now. Okay, so how does our system look like? The constraints are that we have an event on barcode with a string parameter that's supposed to be the input. So that's where the barcode gets into our system. Then we have a POS system somewhere in between doing some magical stuff, and then it outputs a price. That's the basic system we have, and we need tests for that. Easiest thing I can think of is valid barcode is input and a price is output. Let's say respective price to make clear that it's the right one. And the next thing I can think of is a valid barcode, which leads to actually an error message because, and there I should maybe introduce the intermediate state, no respective item. So I get in a valid barcode, but there's no respective item for that barcode in my system. So I output an error message, which leads me to an additional information here, item looked up, which actually means that the output of the system is either a price or an error message. That's my decision. I mean, I could also output a price of 0 whenever I don't find the item, but I kind of feel that's the wrong way to go. And it means that actually we have an additional input source for our system, which is somehow something like an item store, putting in item information, so the mapping from barcodes to items into our system. We have to implement that. Okay, this is the two scenarios I can think of for valid barcodes being put into the system. How about invalid inputs? I think I'm going to treat them in the system, because I don't really see how they should be treated earlier on. So say we have an invalid barcode, and then we would like to immediately have an error message on the output. Make this more specific. This should say invalid barcode, and this should say unknown barcode. What's an invalid barcode? I can think of two possibilities for invalid barcodes, which is null or empty string. Because as far as I know, there's no, it's probably even questionable if empty string is an invalid input, but I'm going to treat it as one. As far as I know, there's no restriction as to what information can be put in barcodes. So since this event is generic, saying there's information from any barcode, I'm going to accept anything that's not the empty string or null as a valid input. Okay, is there anything else I should think of? Do you see anything? In case you do, just drop me a comment. I, for one, don't see anything else, so I'm going to stay with that for now. Going to save my test plan, let's say txt, into the project, and there's no repository associated with the project, whatever there is. Test plan, created initial test plan, commit. Okay, now let's go for realizing that. First thing I want to create is a test for my POS system. So I'm going to spell it out, point of sale test. Create that one. Currently, to me, this feels kind of like an integration test. But from the test plan I just created, I got the feeling that the system is currently small enough that I can go with this integration level tests, because it's probably going to end up being a unit test, or at least only including one additional part of the system, like the item store. Anyways, this brings me to the next thing. I currently don't have test dependencies, so I'm going to add a test dependency real quick. Dependency at JUnit, which is somewhere far further below than you'd expect for JUnit to be. 412 as a test dependency, and done. Now we can use the test annotation and write a first test, which is it going to be? So let's look at our test plan and look for the easiest things to test. Actually, so the my intuition would be to start with a happy path test. But actually, I think this is going to involve multiple things, like the lookup of the item internally. So it's probably a more advanced test, which means I could start with this one, ignoring for now that there is supposed to be a failing lookup in the future, or I could start with the empty input or invalid input cases. And I think this is what I'm going to do here. So go back to my test and say shows error message for null input. Or let's say shows error message if barcode is null. Sounds reasonable for me. Going to try to explore the write test backwards technique, saying I'm start with the assertion, assert that. Somehow I want to have the last message displayed is, what's it going to be according to my test plan? It says invalid barcode. Invalid barcode. And since this is user output, I'm going to make this a sentence. Okay, the question is, where do I get my last message displayed from? I probably need some abstraction of the display. So I'm going to quickly create one. Say interface display. However, this is going to be implemented in the future, and I'm going to create a test display as a class here, saying implements display, and saying this has a public string last message displayed or shown. I used shown up here, so I'm going to use shown down here, last message shown. And then I want to have here a test display last message shown, and I want to create a field for that local variable test display, which is going to be a test display. Now it's going to say me that this is not initialized, so I'm going to initialize it with a new test display. Right? Okay, test running so far. What else do we need? We want to exercise our point of sale actually, which requires me at first to create the point of sale. So I'm going to quickly create it and then say point of sale on barcode null. That's the input I defined, which again requires me to create a local variable, which is going to be a point of sale variable. This one, pos, which is going to be a new point of sale. I feel like this writing backwards thing is not working too good for me because it's kind of hard to create this variable. It takes me a lot of time, but let's see if I can improve on that. For now, I create this method, and now I'm actually able to run the test to see it fail. Assertion expected invalid barcode, but was null. Okay, that's fine with me. Now I have to think about I'm apt to escape. So I'm back to the editor, and I'm actually going to write the first bit of business code, which requires me to get a display actually into my point of sale. So I want to have the display as a constructor parameter. Create constructor with point of sale and map this to display. Go back to the test, save it, rerun it, still failing, right? Yes. Going to the constructor, I want to map this to a new field here. And I want to call here display.show with a message saying invalid barcode, which then again requires me to create this show method here, show string message display text. I'm going to stay with method for now, and requires me to go back to my test because apparently I now need to implement this method in my tests up here. Add unimplemented methods and assign last shown message with message, which turns out to make my test go green, which means I'm going to check in. I'm going to check in the display. I'm going to check in the point of sale. Why is that the git ignore changed? I'm actually not sure. Why did the git ignore change since the last time? Did I check in? I didn't check in a git ignore file at all, right? Compare with head revision is telling me it's empty. Great. So I'm going to at first amend the last commit where I messed up. This is amend, right? Amend previous commit. Which is wrong too, because it's not the initial test plan where I should have created that. So edit git ignore for project for Eclipse project files. Commit that one and then go to what I actually wanted to do, which is adding the new files and saying now displaying error on invalid, or actually on null value for barcode. Fine with me. Get it over with. Switch back to Package Explorer. And this means I want to write the next test case, which is going to be actually first I want to, there's a second test case in here, which is the one for empty string, right? To separate that cleanly, I should probably separate these. Say we have two test cases here, one for null and one for empty string. So now I can tick off this one as done, and I concern myself with the other one, which should go quite quick. But first I'm going to this time amend the commit with the updated test plan commits. Okay, then I go back to my test as I said, and I want to do the same for the empty string, which should be an easy enough test case currently because it's not interesting, right? So I'm not going to do it right now. So this one's open still. Question is, how about this one next? Because this is another error case, I should output another error message. And it will probably require me to check for validity of the input. That's the only change I see. There's still not necessarily a lookup involved because I can just assume that the lookup goes wrong. So I want to go with that test case. Back to the tests. Say new test public void shows unknown barcode if no respective item is known. Yeah, not quite happy with the test names, but we'll see. Here I'm probably going to set up the very same thing. Oh, I wanted to write them backwards, right? So say assert that test display, no, a variable test display is saying last message shown. That's a point where I can't use autocomplete, which I would like to use. So let's try what happens if I create this one now quickly, new test display. So now I could have used the completion and say here is unknown barcode, add a semicolon. It's not strictly backwards now because I created the field before, but on barcode Now again, I have the problem here, right? I have pos. Can I just create a local variable for that? No, I can't. Can I do it if I type a dot? Yes. Whoops. Why assert? Point of sale, which is new point of sale with the test display. And now I can continue. I'm really not that happy with that. Maybe you guys have ideas how I could improve on this. I really like the idea, the general idea of writing the tests backwards, because you think about the outcome before you think of how you get to it. But the tool support in Eclipse really does not seem too good, actually. Whatever, some barcode, and run the test, which fails because it outputs unknown barcode. No, it outputs invalid barcode where it should output invalid. It outputs invalid where it should output unknown. Anyways, you know what I want to say. Switch to our method, which actually has a wrong type here. Going to correct that and say, okay, if object is not null, object is a bad name for that one. Going to refactor that in a second. If this is not null, then I'm going to output unknown barcode, and otherwise I'm going to output invalid barcode. Run that one. This works for me. So let's quickly check that stuff in. Where's the new thing? Why is the test new? No, it's not new. It only added the POM file. Something's really weird here, isn't it? Why is the POM file changed now? Why didn't it propose the POM file earlier on in the last commit? Let's have a look at our history. Show in history. This a little bigger. So we actually have now displaying error. This should already have the change in the POM file, because that's where I included the test dependency. This is really strange. So apparently sometimes eGit is not showing me all the changed files. I really don't like that. Anyways, for now, let's, right, like here, where's the POM file? Why doesn't it show me the POM file? Now it shows me the POM file. This is really messed up, guys. Now it's not there. Actually, I see the dot here, so it's there. This is a problem of display. Come on, guys, really? Anyways, going to amend the last commit with this additional POM file, which is actually needed. And then I'm going to do the next thing. This is a reproducible problem. This is embarrassing, guys. Okay. Right after this episode, I'm going to file a bug for that. That's like impossible. Okay. Anyways, for now, let's say now showing error message for unknown barcode. Commit that one. No uncommitted stuff. Nice. Okay. For refactoring, let's say this is going to be barcode, because that makes much more sense. This is going to be a check saying, whoops, no, redo. This whole thing here is going to be a check saying is valid, because I know I'm going to add additional criteria for validity of barcodes later on. And this is the different output criteria. That's okay for me. Test still running, test still running. So let's quickly switch back to the tests and see how those look like. There's a little duplication in here in the test setup, but I think for now I'm going to stay with that. So again, commit. Yeah, mark all files, even though I don't see them. And say, I amend that, actually. Okay. Put it onto there. Everything's changed. So let's go to the next test case, which actually means I can tick this one off. I have a test for that implemented. Next thing I would like to do is go for this additional case here, because as I just found, this is an additional criterion for the validity of a barcode, and I think now I need to add this in order to make the respective code pass. So it's a good time, I think, to write this very test here. Go back to the file. I mean, the test should be pretty easy to write. And actually, since it's so similar, I'm going to copy it from here. Shows error message if barcode is empty string. And then instead of passing in null here, I'm going to put in empty string. Run this test. This is currently failing, which makes sense. So I go to this method, go in here and say barcode needs to be not null and barcode needs to be not empty. Is that working? That's working for me. So again, I'm going to check everything. Again, it's missing the first file. Anyways, check in anything and say now showing error message on empty barcode. Store that one. Go back to the tests, actually go back to the test plan and tick off the test we've just written, which leaves only one test for us to do, which is the happy path test. Valid barcode, and somehow the item is looked up successfully and the respective price is shown, which actually requires us probably to add quite some new things to our environment, but we're going to see in a second. Write test shows price if item is known. Or say, let's shows price for item. That's the simplest thing I can think of. Assert that test display, no, not the big T display. Create local variable of type test display and assign it to be new test display. Then last shown message should be whatever, $5.99, and I think USD is what was required. No, actually I think this is the required output from the JBrains specification for this tool. So let's see how we can get there. Of course, I need to somehow call the onBarcode method. No, right now I can create, oh, this is really fragile. Point of sale equals new point of sale with the test display. And then say, okay, on barcode, whatever something like this. And this is going to be my valid input. So anyways, I need more test setup for this because somehow I need to register items at the point of sale. Question is, do I want to register them directly at the point of sale? Probably not, because I don't think that's what's going to happen later. I probably want to dump them into some kind of database and then just use them. So I'm going to abstract away from the point of sales item store in this test. Say I create a new interface, say item store. Yep. And I'm going to create a new test stub, which is my test item store, and implements the item store. That much for now. I'm going to actually give this item store, first I want to create the item store, test item store, assign that to a variable test item store, right? Then I want to give this test item store an item, register item with the barcode from down here. Barcode, right? Move it up here. Barcode, and now I need to somehow represent a price. And since representing money and stuff is a chapter of its own, I'm going to, for now, represent the price as a string, because that's really all I need, right? Register, create this method on, on my test item store, which is quite all right. I'm going to have to store that somehow, say private map from string to string in that case. Items is a new Java util hash map. And in this method, just say items put barcode string, which should really be price 9, whatever I just did. Price. That is what I wanted to do. Okay, so go back to the test. That's actually the wrong test, right? I did add this whole thing to the wrong test. Why didn't you warn me? Come on. So this is actually supposed to be placed here. This is supposed to go back in there. Sometimes you do stupid mistakes because you think over so much different things that you forget what you're actually supposed to do, which means do right stuff. Okay, back to having this in the right test. I want to pass it into our point of sale as a parameter, test item store, which requires me to change the constructor to take in an item store, which breaks our past tests because now I need an item store there too, which I can easily create and pass in. Test item store, test item store. Maybe I should have pulled these things out into a setup method by now, which saved me the hassle of doing that for each and every test. Anyways, can refactor as soon as this test goes green. Now I have the item store in there, I expect a return value, and I can execute the test, which actually currently fails because it outputs unknown barcode. It's fine with me, that's what I expected, so I go back and actually change the code to do it right. If this code is valid and I somehow magically look up in the item store, which I don't have in a field right now. Item store, yes. Item store, look into the item store and say contains or get item by barcode. This method does not currently exist, so I create it. This is supposed to return a string, which is the price. I know that this is not the ideal representation of an item. Probably I want to introduce a model class item, but I think I don't need it right now. So since I'm not currently aware of any additional properties of this item, I'm going to stay with the just string representation for now and see if I can factor the rest in as soon as I need it. To new local variable, which is the item. Actually, it's not the item, right? I should be consistent with what I'm saying, so I call this get price, and this is going to be price then. And then I'm going to check if price is not null. Convention or design decision I made here that the price is going to be null if the item is unknown. If it's not null, I'm going to display the price. Otherwise, I'm going to display unknown barcode. Now I have a problem in my tests because my test stub does not implement the new method I just created on the item store. Can quickly factor that in and make it actually look up the barcode in our items. Maybe I should even call it prices. Anyway, let's try to run a test. Our test succeeds. That's nice. I'm going to check that in. Let's see what files we have here. I want to check in all of that. Now displaying price for known items, or let's say for items in item store. Commit that. Let's see. Tests are running, so it's time for some refactoring, and I'm actually going to start with the tests because I don't like this duplication growing bigger and bigger because of additional dependencies I have. So let's make set up point of sale method up here, and let's make these fields, convert that to a field. Yes, 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 all of this. Convert this one to a field, and even convert the last one here to field. Rename it later. And then move the initialization up to this test here. This should still run, right? It does. I'm not going to commit here because I feel confident that I can change the rest of the tests without breaking anything by just removing these respective lines. Execute, still running. delete that, execute, still running. And this is the trickiest one. We actually need to register something, execute, still running. Okay, I think this made our tests much cleaner, much shorter, and I think easier to read. So I'm going to commit that. Cleaned up tests. Commit the magical not visible file. And now let's see if I can clean up the implementation, because actually there has been some cluttering in here too. One thing I don't really like is this null check. There's implicit policy. So let's see if I can refactor that. Actually, what I would like to have here is a check for the item's price. Say item store contains barcode, and then move the get price method to down there, down here. That's what I would like to have to avoid this explicit null check here, because it's really the responsibility of the item store to know when a barcode is present and when it isn't. So boolean contains string barcode. Contains is the wrong name here. Now that I look at it from the side of the item store, has item, has price for barcode. Do I add this for thing or not? No, I'm not going to add it. Whatever, somehow, when I make things wrong. I hit today some strange combination of keys that makes things go broken. Has price. Okay. It's still performing this refactoring. My machine seems to be a little on vacation. Go back to the test, because now I again have a problem in my test stub, which is missing a method. A method which I am going to implement real quick, saying items contains key barcode. Re-execute the test. Now everything's compiling again. Tests are still running. So I'm going to check in the changed. By the way, can tick off things here, right? I can tick off the test. I like that. That's the last test actually I had to write, and I still have no new tests in mind. So all that's left is cleaning up and committing, of course. First saying improved API of item store to by check for known barcodes. Okay. How does this look like? Going back to the actual code. I'm still not happy because I still have the nesting of these conditions here. I have the is valid check and the invalid thing down here. And I'm going to pull this out into methods, say on valid barcode. Now the question is this still on the same abstraction level? One time I'm outputting something, one time I don't. So I think it's not. And I'm going to pack this into an on invalid barcode method so that I can, so I have these two cases at the same level of abstraction again. I like to move this down to have get as close as possible to the newsletter style, which means by the way, that I should move this method up. First the validity check, then the case on valid barcode, then the case on invalid barcode. Well, now I think I like that implementation. I'm going to check in. Oh no, I'm going to run the tests first. Still working. Going to check that in and say refactored internal structure of pos. Check them all and commit. Okay, and I guess having looked back at our test plan, that all tests are ticked off. The system is doing what it's supposed to do, I think. So this concludes my efforts to implement the point of sale, I think, according to the requirements that JBrains put on me. And for now, I'm content with that. Going to push it and see what he has to say about my implementation. Anyways, I thank you very much for watching this episode. I hope you took something from it. And if it is that also for me, I'm trying to experiment with my implementation style, trying to try out new things, getting to know what other people are doing, which I think is really important. And if you're serious about doing software development, I really think you should take the time to try out things. That's what kata are for. That's what looking at examples of other people and trying them out for yourself is for. And yeah, what better to do on a long Easter weekend with a lot of rain outside than to try out new things. Anyways, thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you next time.